Good day, everyone. It is Londononion returning with part 2 of our handler review and build for Remnant 2. As a brief recap, in our previous video, we covered the strategical meta of the handler class, discussed the associated skills, and went through our preferred builds with the bonded predator. Now I'll continue to speak on builds from the perspective of playing on the Apocalypse difficulty, though as a brief disclaimer, I am relatively young at Remnant 2, and still have plenty more to discover. So naturally, this class and selected archetypes and the associated build will likely require revision in the future. And of course, to avoid confusion, our dog companion will be nicknamed Rufus for the duration of this discussion. But without further delay, we will continue where we left off from our previous video and begin by discussing the Bonded Beastmaster. This is a pairing with the Summoner archetype. The Summoner prioritizes recovery, passivity in combat, and a slight edge toward temporary damage buffs. One of the gaps in this class is the lack of ammo maintenance, as there are no perks that aid in this regard. So logically, as far as weapon loadout goes, using high economy weapons, typically low magazine and high damage, would be the optimal choice. This is at least what I have had the most success with, unless one wishes to compensate for this with their rings or relic shards. Otherwise, the nature of this class reduces one's reliance on weapons and allocates some of the offensive load to their summons. If done properly, I would go as far as to say that one could do a minority of the fighting while exploring. While playing as the Bonded Beastmaster, Rufus's skill setting will naturally influence the skill setting of the Beastmaster side of this pairing. Typically, he is either set as the support dog or the guard dog. Support dog will synergize with the regrowth perk of the summoner and ultimately increase the rate of healing, up to 1.75 health units per second. With the press and hold command, healing will become much faster. Additionally, I keep Rufus next to me with the double tap feature to keep the healing consistent and have him operate as more of a bastion. Enemies that get too close or breach the defenses of the summoner minions will have Rufus as an additional obstacle before reaching the handler. While in guard dog mode, similar to our previous discussion on the bonded predator, Rufus can mainly be used for enemy redirection and can consequently fit the role of a third summon, one that particularly likes to remain outside of the Pokeball, so to speak. His threat generation while in guard dog mode would keep most enemies focused on him, and the accompanying summons create a small platoon at the command of the Beastmaster. However, Rufus's skill setting is not set in stone, and the sub-archetype skill setting will depend on anticipated enemy profiles and/or preferred playstyle. So we'll briefly speak on the skill settings for this pairing. Now, the skill pairings can technically be mixed to one's desire, though I would argue there is a logic to how they are paired. Starting off with Rufus as the guard dog, I prefer to have the Hollows as the summon of choice. In my experience, while Rufus is stealing all the enemy attention, this effect is not to be abused. Unlike the Bonded Predator, the Bonded Beastmaster is not oriented towards significant burst damage and cannot back up Rufus with the same efficacy as the Hunter. Therefore, to aid Rufus in combat, the Hollows can be employed as backups. Plus, when needed, Rufus's Howl can also reduce received damage for all allies, including the summons. The Beastmaster can still assist from a distance or apply more attention to key targets, such as an elite. It's also important to mention, the summons can be used as potent bombs should they be nearing their demise. This specific setup suits a more aggressive playstyle. When Rufus is in support mode, I would employ the Flyers while keeping Rufus next to the handler. The Flyers will shoot from afar, adding to the volume of projectiles issued toward enemies, while Rufus provides both additional recovery and close-knit protection. This setup is meant to be slower paced and defensive. Now, some of you might be arriving at the immediate conclusion, employ Flyers for flying enemies and Hollows for ground enemies. Though I would not disagree, I think there is an important and distinctive trade-off with these two skill pairings. Employing the guard dog with Hollows means that most airborne enemies will require the intervention of the Bonded Beastmaster. Employing the support dog and the Flyers is more versatile but a bit less efficacious against numerous foes. The flyers can target both airborne and ground enemies, but will do so at a slower pace. Consequently, one may have to maintain a slower pace or increase their involvement as the beastmaster. This is not necessarily a con, but an important difference to mention. Now, one may wish to mix these skills differently, and technically, it can work, but I only imagine this would hamper the effectiveness of either skill. Rufus on guard dog mode with flyers may have a greater likelihood of being overwhelmed when directed ahead. Hollows with the support dog setting may not have enough offensive support to be as aggressive as they could be. However, this is just my logic and experience thus far. The Reaver is more of a hybrid and is far tougher with greater damage infliction, but is limited to one summon and is significantly slower. This will take away from the passive nature of the summoner with fewer numbers and an easily overwhelmed target, that being the Reaver. It may serve alternative purposes, such as keeping elites busy or putting down damage on certain bosses, though generally I prefer to stick with hollows or flyers. This will allow the summoner to stick with economical weapons and focus on key targets. If my minions should be losing health, Rufus's Howl command may be used to preserve their time in battle. Alternatively, their sacrifice can be strategically employed to not only finish off a nearby foe, but also provide myself with increased damage and a greater capacity for recovery with lifesteal for a limited time. The efficacy of these skills and their synergy are heavily contingent on the loadout for this pairing. The amulet is really what makes this pairing work in the way that I intend it to. A handler's greatest fear is losing their doggo. A summoner's greatest fear is having no summons. I found that the best way to prevent this outcome is with the hyperconductor. This amulet doubles skill charges and increases skill cooldowns by 50%. The only deficit is that it reduces mod power generation by 15%. I'd consider this to be a small trade-off and easily compensated for with the rest of our loadout choices. Starting off with our rings, I chose Black Pawn Stamp, Soul Guard, Encrypted Ring, and Cataloger's Jewel. Speaking on the Black Pawn Stamp, this ring will synergize directly with the amulet. Not only will one have access to doubling their available summons, but the cooldowns will also be increased. This lends more use to the sacrifice function as a means of applying quick damage while having a second set of minions ready for summoning. Provided one is not abusing their minions, this should reduce one's odds of being left as a lone summoner. Next, the Soul Guard ring. This ring will add a stack of bulwark for every active summon, and this will slightly incentivize the use of hollows and flyers since two can be summoned as opposed to a single Reaver. This ring, however, also plays into the mod of choice for our primary and secondary weapons. Similar to our discussion on the Bonded Predator, I value Space Crabs and Root Lash. Using either mod will maximize one's bulwark stacks in aggregate with two summons and Rufus. Employing both would essentially turn the Bonded Beastmaster into a platoon leader with a hierarchy of subordinates on a spectrum, from precious to expendable. As a small tangent, whether or not both mods are employed will depend on the skill pairing of Rufus and the minions. When using Guard Dog and Hollows, I prefer to maximize aggression and bulwark stacks with both Root Lash and Space Crabs. This is also intended to aid with recovery through lifesteal. When taking the more proactive and defensive approach with Support Dog and Flyers, I prefer to use Space Crabs and Scrap Shot. With Rufus kept by the Beastmaster and Flyers naturally maintaining distance, enemy attention is more likely to be centered on you, the platoon leader, and Scrap Shot can be used as an extra layer of defense to slow enemy advancement, while Space Crabs can wither down health if not eliminate enemies before they get too close. This discussion on mods synergizes with the Encrypted Ring. This ring is mod dependent for its effect, and our mod choices are for the most part inexpensive. Upon using a mod, 20% of one's health will be replenished over 10 seconds, which will add on to the healing edge of the summoner. Due to the mods being inexpensive, health regeneration becomes seamless and efficient. Wrapping up our rings is the Cataloger's Jewel. This is intended to be a compensatory choice for mod generation, given how frequently I predict these mods will be used. As stated earlier, A summoner's greatest fear is not having any minions ready. In addition to Rufus and the minions, mods are an extra layer of offensive/defensive resources, provided of course they are not being abused. My weapons of choice are balanced between a slow but hard-hitting long gun and a nimbler but weaker handgun. I personally favor bows and an automatic secondary of some sort. Regarding mutators, I enjoy using Spirit Healer and Bandit for my secondary. Additionally, for the melee weapon, I choose to go with the Labyrinth Staff, which aids with mod power generation, and I also carry over the Shielded Strike mutator for added protection where melee combat is necessary. My relic of choice is the Ruined Heart, mainly because of its health and mod power generation. The shards I go with are skill cooldown, armor effectiveness, and either increased ammo pickups or increased mod and skill casting speed. Lastly, the traits I would prioritize are Spirit, Amplitude, Blood Bond, Expertise, Bark Skin, and Rugged. This build essentially allows one to explore zones with a disposable mob. The Hyperconductor Amulet allows a seamless resummoning with the support of Root Lash, Space Crabs, and of course Rufus, if anyone should get too close, if the handler should fall, or if there is a need for boosted recovery. The main meta behind this build of the Bonded Beastmaster is attrition. Everything is designed to constantly regrow and work against the opposition. The Bonded Beastmaster may not be the most devastating in damage output, but will have an answer to every trial thrown in their direction. Theoretically, they will outlast any lengthy tribulation through recovery and numbers. I haven't been able to see a significant impact in using the attack dog setting over the other two that would create a vastly different result. But that is not to say that it is useless with this pairing. I just prefer the benefits of support dog and guard dog as a means of self-preservation. Attrition is the key here after all. The enemy's demise will come with time, which the Bonded Beastmaster is built for. That otherwise concludes our video for today. There is still one more sub-archetype that I would use with the handler, and I will discuss this in our next video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.